The cold night wrapped around the city like a heavy blanket, and the flickering streetlights cast long shadows at the empty bus stop, where a young woman sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her thin jacket no match for the biting wind. She had been drifting from place to place, carrying nothing but a small bag of worn clothes and a heart weighed down with loneliness. Homelessness had not come suddenly, but crept into her life step by step, first losing her job, then her apartment, then the friends who had once promised to always be there. Now, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to, she sat at the bus stop, staring at the pavement, as if answers might rise up from the cracks. Just then, a small voice broke the silence. "Hi," said a little girl, no older than 7, clutching a stuffed bunny with one hand while holding a juice box with the other. Her eyes were wide, innocent yet strangely full of wisdom. The young woman blinked in surprise. "Hello," she murmured, her voice hoarse from disuse. She glanced around but saw no one else nearby. The girl's mother, it seemed, was standing a few feet away, busy on her phone. The little girl tilted her head curiously, then scooted closer, ignoring the chill in the air. "Why do you look so sad?" she asked softly. The young woman swallowed hard, unsure how to answer a child's pure honesty. "Because," she whispered, "I don't really have a home right now." The girl's brows furrowed as though she were trying to solve a very important puzzle. Then she said something that made the young woman's chest tighten. "Well, that's okay. You need a home, and I need a mommy. Maybe we can help each other." For a moment, the young woman thought she had misheard. But the little girl's face was glowing with sincerity, her small voice ringing with an innocence that held more compassion than any adult had shown her in months. The words pierced the young woman's heart, breaking through walls of hopelessness she had built around herself. She felt tears sting her eyes. "Why would you say that?" she asked, her voice trembling. The girl shrugged in the way only children can, as if it were the simplest truth. "Because sometimes people belong together. You look like you'd be a good mommy, and I think you just need someone to love you." The homeless woman, who had been invisible to so many, was suddenly seen, not as a burden or a mistake, but as a person worthy of love. She wanted to hug the child, but fear of rejection and the weight of her own unworthiness kept her frozen. Just then, the little girl's mother hung up the phone and called her name. The child turned, waved her bunny, and ran back. But before leaving, she looked over her shoulder and whispered, "Don't worry, you'll find your home." The bus came and went, and the night grew deeper, but those words stayed with the young woman. For the first time in months, a seed of hope took root in her heart. She realized that home was not always about walls and roofs. It could also be about connection, about love, about finding someone who believed you deserved to belong. The next day, she walked into a shelter, something she had been too ashamed to do before. This time, she carried with her the echo of a child's belief in her. Days turned into weeks, and the young woman started piecing her life back together. Job applications, therapy sessions, slow but steady healing. And though she didn't see that little girl again, she often thought about her words, as if they were a promise written in the stars. One evening months later, as she volunteered at a children's community center, she heard a familiar giggle. She turned, and there was the little girl clutching her bunny. Their eyes met, and the child ran up, smiling wide. "See, I told you, you found your home." This time, the young woman knelt, tears spilling freely as she hugged the girl tightly. In that embrace, she realized the truth. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest miracles, and sometimes a child's faith is enough to remind us that no one is ever truly lost as long as love finds a way to whisper, "You belong." It was late evening, the kind of evening when the sky is heavy with clouds and the wind feels like it carries every sorrow in the world, and there she was, a young woman with her hair unkempt, her jacket far too thin for the biting cold, sitting quietly on a bus stop bench with her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, as if holding herself together was only thing keeping her from shattering. She had been drifting for months now, moving from one empty corner of the city to another, trying to find warmth where there was none, and though her body was weary from hunger and her heart was heavier than the bag of worn clothes by her feet, what weighed on her most was the loneliness, the feeling that she no longer belonged anywhere, invisible to those who passed, forgotten by those who once promised to care. She stared down at the cracked pavement with eyes glazed over in exhaustion until a soft, unexpected voice tugged at her from the silence. "Hi," it said, and when she looked up, she saw a little girl, no older than 7, her hair in braids, a stuffed bunny dangling from one hand, and a juice box in the other. Her innocent face lit with the kind of warmth that seemed untouched by the harshness of the world. Startled, the young woman blinked and whispered back a hoarse, "Hello." Her voice rusty as though it had been unused for too long. She glanced around and noticed a woman standing a few feet away, clearly the child's mother, distracted by a phone call, unaware that her daughter had wandered closer. The little girl tilted her head with curious eyes, inching forward, though unafraid of the shadows that clung to the stranger before her. "Why do you look so sad?" the child asked, her voice gentle yet carrying a strange maturity. The young woman's throat tightened. She had been asked 1,000 times by social workers, shelter workers, strangers in passing, but none of them had ever asked with this kind of honesty. It made something in her ache, because she whispered, struggling to keep her tears at bay, "I don't really have a home right now." The little girl paused, furrowing her brows the way only children do when they are trying to understand something far beyond their years, and then, as if solving the puzzle, she spoke words so simple yet so profound that they pierced straight into the young woman's heart. "Well, that's okay. You need a home, and I need a mommy. Maybe we can help each other." The young woman's eyes widened as if the world had stopped spinning for a moment. Had she heard that right? Could a child so small truly say something so powerful? And yet the sincerity in the girl's eyes was undeniable. It wasn't pity. It wasn't judgment. It was pure compassion wrapped in innocence of childhood. The young woman's lips trembled as she fought the wave of emotion crashing through her. "Why? Why would you say that?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible. The girl shrugged with a smile, as though it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because sometimes people belong together, and you look like you'd be a good mommy, and I think you just need someone to love you." In that moment, the walls the young woman had built around herself, the walls of shame and despair and fear, began to crack. For months she had felt invisible, dismissed, and unwanted. But this small child had looked straight at her and seen something worth loving. She wanted to pull the child into her arms, to hold on to that warmth and never let go. But years of rejection had left her frozen, afraid to reach out only to be pushed away again. The little girl's mother called her name then, snapping her back to reality. The child turned, waved her bunny, and ran toward her mother. But before climbing into the car, she looked back over her shoulder, and with a smile that seemed to glow against the dark, she whispered, "Don't worry, you'll find your home." The bus came and went, the night deepened, and the young woman was left alone once more. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time in a long while, she felt the faint spark of hope, a belief that maybe she wasn't as lost as she thought. The child's words echoed in her mind like a promise. Home isn't always walls and roofs. Sometimes home is love, connection, belonging, and maybe, just maybe, she could find that again the next morning, clutching her bag and those whispered words in her heart. She walked into a shelter she had avoided countless times before, too ashamed to seek help, but this time she told herself that if a child could see worth in her, perhaps she could try to see it too. The weeks that followed were not easy. She faced long lines for meals, restless nights in shared rooms, and the endless uphill climb of job applications and rejections. Yet each time she felt like giving up, she remembered the little girl's voice, and it pushed her forward, step by step, one fragile hope at a time. She found part-time work, then counseling, then the fragile beginnings of stability, and though life was still hard, the belief that she could be loved, that she could belong, kept her going. Months passed, and one evening as she volunteered at a community center, helping with an after-school program for kids, she heard a familiar giggle that froze her in place. She turned slowly, and there she was, the little girl with the braids and the bunny, running across the room. Their eyes met and recognition flashed instantly. The girl beamed and rushed over. "See, I told you. You found your home." The young woman fell to her knees, tears spilling freely as she gathered the child in her arms, holding on as if to anchor herself in that truth. She whispered thank you over and over, because this little girl had unknowingly given her the greatest gift, a reason to believe again, and in that embrace, she realized something profound. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest miracles. Sometimes a child's innocent faith is enough to pull someone back from the edge of despair. And sometimes home isn't a place you find but a love that finds you, whispering in the gentlest of ways, "You belong, you matter, you are not alone."